Hi, everybody. You're tuned in to Where Waters Meet, a podcast featuring discussions on fly fishing, art, all things outdoors with a conservation focus. Okay, guys, it's Alex. I'm here, Where Waters Meet podcast at the beautiful gallery at Western Maine Yurts in Bethel, Maine. And as promised, we are going to be doing a On the Easel podcast episode. And I get a lot of questions about my art. And so I figured this would be a fun place where I could show you guys some of the things that I have been working on, that I am working on. I could go over frustrations, trials, tribulations, and all of the above. And maybe, share a little bit about some of my process and what I do. And you guys can get a little picture of that. So I figured that what I would do is start out and discuss the two paintings that I have been working on for the last couple weeks. And the one in the corner is on your left is a landlocked salmon that I painted, and it's titled Dress for the Party, which I thought was fitting because landlocked salmon in the fall are extremely beautiful with beautiful cheeks, and they display just such high levels of iridescence that it's a real challenge to try to capture. And the teals and the blues and the purples actually are just beautiful. And that painting I started out with a purple underpainting, and it kind of gives me a base color to kind of like leapfrog off with everything else. It kind of sets the tone for the piece, and that was a little bit different for me. I've never done that, and it seemed to work. But the biggest thing that I was trying to capture with that piece was uh, like capturing the dynamic range of a salmon in the fall, because there's extreme levels of brights, and that iridescence really is tough to capture and have shine through, and you have to plan that out from the beginning of the composition of your piece till the end. And I'm happy with that piece. And it kind of inspired me, to be honest with you, uh, to go on and paint this rainbow trout that's on the easel behind me. This is an Androscoggin River rainbow trout that we caught in my boat, and it was just a really neat picture. And I like the composition of that, and that inspired me to want to paint it. And also going through the process of painting the reflection on the salmon, I was like, I had a lot of fun doing that. I'm going to kind of go down that route. So I got into my iPhotos library, which is completely unorganized. So that usually just involves me just scrolling and scrolling forever. I really need to like start like a fish album, and whenever I take fish pictures, just drag it over there, because it's a little bit daunting, going back through, 10, 12, 14 years of photos trying to find what you want. But that one was a ways back, and I got that. And so this rainbow trout that I painted is called Rainbow Reflections. And I think it was quite fitting. Same thing. I tried to capture the reflective properties, which is fun and challenging all in one sense. They kind of fight you, so to speak. Like, and this might just be my experience. I'm not a trained artist. I didn't go to art school. So if anybody else has something that they'd like to add and it differs from my experience, that's fine. But in my experience with oil paints, I find that I feel like I'm fighting things most of the time. Sometimes you fight things and it just doesn't turn out the way you want it. Sometimes you're fighting things and next thing you know, you turn around and you made some great, beautiful discovery that you had no clue was going to happen at all. And that's why I think the beauty of art is being playful. Uh, that's kind of how I would explain my process and how I go about oil painting is it's really every piece is a journey of discovery and just being playful and experiencing the paint on the canvas. I do a lot of on canvas mixing with my colors and paints. I don't segment everything off and kind of go, which is a whole other aspect of painting. If you go that route, I'm not that. I kind of end up just everything kind of has an experience together on the canvas. And yeah, so it's just being playful, just having fun and not being scared. And not everything turns out your way and some things end up way better. And that's kind of what is exciting about painting for me at least. And I think part of that is my background, just growing up with my family being painters and watching them. My mother was a very free spirited artist. Um, and, was just, I guess, what a lot of people probably would think of when it comes to an artist. She was an amazing free spirit and it wasn't the most organized individual in the world, and her process though was so involved, and it was really amazing to watch as a kid. And she had a stamina for her art that it was unrivaled. I've never really seen it. Like if my mother got painting a painting, she could paint for 20 hours if she had to. She would just get so involved and she couldn't imagine getting away from her work. And it was really cool to see her immerse herself like that. I have moments when I'm like that, but I definitely have a shelf life to my creative drive, is I guess the way that I would explain it. Like I'll hit a point where I have to walk away because I know that mentally I'm not available enough to contribute to the piece at all. And sometimes I'm like, this isn't going to go good if I keep doing this, and I got to walk away. And I also like walking away from paintings and then coming back the next day because it gives me a chance to see it again with fresh eyes. And especially with fish, I don't grid off my stuff so that my proportions are perfect. I just kind of sketch it on the canvas. And there's times where uh eyeball placement might not be ideal where I'd want it, or the fin structure isn't what I would like, and so I I have to go down the route of walking away, and then I come back and I look at it and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right, and then I have an opportunity to fix that. And I would say, 6 hours of painting continuous would be a lot for me. On my bigger pieces, I might paint, 3 to 6 hours, and I might do that for multiple sittings. And that's kind of my preferred way to do it. But everybody's different. And I have so much respect for the artists that do it in one shot. But that's not me, nonetheless. I'm doing like a drizzle work, like like the caddis that I have in the background. And though that's a completely different medium and style. It's not oil paint. That's actually just house paint. And I get a cup of high gloss house paint and dip the paintbrush in there with the bristles so it holds paint. And then I paint that, drizzling it on the canvas. And those are just fast and fun. They're, quick. They're either going to turn out okay or not. The challenge with those are if I get too much paint on the canvas, because it's wet house paint, it will just turn into a black pool of just paint or whatever color I'm using. And the can it's ruined at that point. So the tough part with those are knowing how much is enough paint, how much is not enough paint. And there are times where, to achieve what I want to with the drizzle work, I do have to do multiple settings with those, because in order to get the level of detail, I have to let certain layers dry. But most of those I'm able to do in one setting, and that's why the prices of them reflect they're more affordable work of art, and but they're fun departures from my oil paintings. I love the challenge and the detail of my oil paintings, but I also like the free spiritedness of the the drizzle art too. So they're fun. And I hope that I'm not rambling on too much for you guys and that I'm making some form of sense. But I figured that something that we could go into that was a little detail related today would be paints, and kind of a little bit of a process of these. And I was not a painter at all until, oh boy, I don't even know. I'd have to look back, but I shared in an earlier episode that my journey with art and painting began with fly fishing. And so I grew up sketching as a kid, and I never really got to painting until I started catching trout. And I just was like, I got to paint these things. These things are great. Like, they're beautiful. Like, look at all these colors. I got to do this. And so in the beginning of my journey or quest, I hit up my mother, because she was my art go-to. And I said, what do I need to do? Like, I don't know how to oil paint. I gotta get supplies, and what do I do? So my mother, when I grew up, the only oil paints that were available at that time for her were these just common solvent based, oil paints, or you had to use solvents with the oil paints. So that involved thinners and turpentine and the such. So when I grew up, I remember the house would really smell quite bad uh, when my mother was painting. And my mother became more concerned with her health as she aged. And she was like, these solvents are kind of terrible. So she was the one that found out and knew about these new water miscible oils. And she was like, you ought to go with Holbein. And they're a Japanese brand. And this is Prussian blue, which is very common. These get all beat up. You just throw them in a tray, and they get disgusting in the process of what you're doing, and the ends get all dirty and everything. But like, this is a neat blue. I really like this blue. And but yeah, so we like put together an order. I went and visited her, and we got Holbein. So I went down the Holbein route, and what I liked about the Holbein is the odor's not bad. Um, they have a pretty good consistency on the brush throughout, I would say. They have a high level of variability though amongst colors, which is not something that's unique to Holbein. It's just a lot of these colors still are used, they're made with different products. You have uh cobalt blue and cadmium, uh, red, and you got like they're made with still toxic things. However, they change the way that the consistency of the paint is. So some of the paint is a little firmer um, and thick, and then you have some paint that's extremely uh, thin, almost translucent on its own. And you learn to use all of those amongst themselves. And there is variability amongst brands. But so I still try to stick with Holbein for the most part. And that's if I am able to plan ahead. And the reason why I say that is because I I'm not great at that, I guess is the reason why I say that. And what I mean is, well, just the other day, like right here, I have this is Winsor Newton, and this is titanium white, which I don't use for mixing. I use titanium white mostly for really making things stand out. It's like an end type thing. So I use a lot of titanium white on the eye, on the rainbow trout behind me to really get that reflective property from it. But typically I would have Holbein, but I have Winsor Newton now. And the reason why is because I did not think ahead to order any. And then I was out and I needed to finish a painting because I was in it and I wanted to finish it. And so I ended up going to 100 Acre Wood, which is a great little art shop on Main Street in Norway, Maine. And if you go there, you'll get to visit Steve, and Steve's the man. And he carries Winsor Newton water miscible oils, and I like them. I like them too, and I actually particularly like their whites because I always ending up with like a couple tubes of the white or the black because I run out of those colors quite often. Payne's Gray is another. This I use a lot of Payne's Gray. This is probably one of my favorite colors within my palette that I like to paint with. And I think it just has to do with just fish tones and water tones. It's a very nice dark bluish gray. And there's often times where you think something is black, but but it's not. It's just a very, very dark blue. And like, so Payne's Gray is, it's pretty awesome for that. But I haven't really gone down the road of trying really other oils other than that, but I figured I'd just kind of let you guys know. People have asked me that question before. They're like, well, what kind of oil paints do you paint with? And they're like, well, what brand? And so that's that. I really pretty much, for the most part, use the Holbein Duo Aqua oil paint. And then if need be, and I need paints now today, like I said, then I'll end up going with the Winsor Newton. And that's just because it's locally available to me. And I have no complaints over it. To be quite honest with you, I like their tubes better. I feel like they're easier to roll up so that you can get all of your paint out of them. But I do like the Holbein, and then the odor and toxicity of them are supposed to be a little bit better from what I've heard. And they're Japanese. They're a little more money, but they're really, really nice. So that's that on as far as oil paints. And I was thinking of what else I could do on the Easel special, because this is it's brand new, and I this is evolving. We're figuring out what's working, and I would love everybody's feedback and comments, because I don't know if this is something that you find interesting or that you would like to see more of, or if you'd like to just see the traditional podcast where we talk about fly fishing topics. But please leave that in the comments section on this video, and let us know if you found this interesting, if you found it helpful, if it was engaging. Like, please let us know, and that way we can adjust accordingly. But something that I thought that I could do, which might be kind of odd, is I didn't clean up my palette from my detail work on rainbow reflections back here. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll just show my palette and kind of show people what I got going on. But this is kind of like my palette that I used. And these are different shades of, natural greens and brown tones, and and then my pinks. And this is the majority of what I use to do my detail work. And what I mean by that is I went in first and I built my bottom kind of bases and layers in the painting. And then it becomes an issue of just playing around and getting the right tones and the right colors and the right detail. And, you know, there is no rhyme or reason to it. There, for me, in my process, there's obviously of a beautiful thing called a color wheel that you can uh you know refer to if you're a new artist. And there's a lot of artists that are very, very thought out and calculated, and they mix all of their paint colors before they kind of even start a process of it. And I just start getting paint on a palette and I just start mixing stuff around until till it looks right. And then I put it up there. So that's that's a palette. These are great if anybody's looking to do any painting. I get them all the time, and you just rip a sheet off, and then you got a whole new palette ready to go underneath it. And it's also nice. Oh, look at that! I just got paint on the table. It's also nice because you can you can put like cellophane on top of it, which I do. I do that quite a bit. Like, let's say that you were working and then you needed to leave, or you wanted to leave. Like I was saying, I stop painting quite often. I just put some, I actually use cling wrap, but you put cling wrap down over the top and kind of seal it. And it really helps out. You can come back the next day, and because oil paint dries very slowly, you can peel that off and you're good to go. And your paints, for the most part, will be okay. There's a few colors that dry faster than others. White is really slow to dry. So that's a nice color to come back to. But yeah, that's a nice way to not waste paint, which I try to do as often as I can, because, you know, paint's not cheap, especially oil paint. But oh, and another thing to discuss as far as water miscible oils is there's different products that I use with it. There's obviously, it sounds weird, right? Like water and oil. It's like the one thing that you were taught, like, you know, like as a little kid, like don't mix water and oil, you know. And and it is kind of true. And you can take water mixable oils and you can have a cup of water and you can dip that in the water and then you can thin out your paint. And that's something that you can do, but it does eventually make the paint sticky. And I think it's because at the end of the day, you are mixing water and oil. I don't know what they do to make it so you can mix water and oil, but it does make the paint sticky eventually. And it can make it so that it kind of wants to drag as opposed to lay down with the brush. So I use I use water sparingly with it. There's times where I do use water to thin out my paint, but I don't use it all the time. And there's other things that I do like to use, like there's like water mixable oil medium that you can use, and it's a specific oil that they've put together that you use that's water soluble, that you can dip your brush in and use to thin paints. They make water miscible linseed oil, and that's also nice too. And what I will say about using those two as opposed to water is that the flow of the paint is very, very, very nice. So a time when I would use, say, a linseed or an oil painting medium is if I had really, really, really fine detail work that I wanted to do. A perfect example would be if I was doing the lines on the gill plate or the edge of a fish, or just wanted a very thin, defined dark line. Um, I would take a nice bright, brush, and I would use a little bit of the medium and get the paint thinned down slightly. And I would load that brush so that I had a very nice, crisp, sharp line on the brush. And then you can kind of almost run it like a pencil at that point. And the paint will flow really good and it will lay out nice and it will keep a nice, thin line. I really like it for detail applications like that, or detail that you want to have look very sharp. It's good. It's nice. However, the one thing that I'll say is that oftentimes, whether you're using linseed or medium, it can give your paint a high level of sheen and it looks glossy. And there's times where you don't want that. If you use that with like ivory blacks, it sometimes in the right lights actually makes the painting have glare in the areas like that. And that can be distracting at times. So that might be a situation where I would use water to thin my paint if I needed to, so that I don't have that added level of sheen. But for whoever you are and whatever your art is like, it's possible that that's not a hindrance to you. You might want sheen, you might not want sheen. Your art might not matter so much if you have high levels of sheen or not. So that's a personal preference, but that's kind of my approach to what I add to my paints to thin them and what have you. And that's where it's kind of a little bit different. In the past, you saw the oil painters and they always had a little cup of turpentine and it was great. I mean, like, awesome way to thin paints and get the consistencies that you wanted, but just a little more toxic with your lungs and the solvents that you were exposed to. So that's that. I hope that you guys enjoyed that little episode regarding kind of a little bit of my style of how I go about things and what I use for paints and products. And yeah, so just to recap, we got these two here. They're available. They aren't up on my online store yet, which they will be eventually, but you can go to alpolandart.com. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate the support, and we'll see you guys at the next podcast.